Hey, it's the Agile Podcast. No, because at a company that I was at before Jessica was there, I was kind of juggling both product owner and Scrum Master responsibilities. And there were 3 teams. And my day was very broken up because I was trying to do product owner stuff and I was trying to do team forming type activities. Mm-hmm. And once the product person says, hey, there's too many teams, I am having to spend so much of my time that I should be focusing with customers. Now I have to deal with the teams to help the teams do team things, air quotes, team things. Mm-hmm. They're important, whatever team things are. And then the business, of course, is like, the product person has a problem? Oh, what can we do? Where's here? Have our money. Whereas the Scrum Master, they'd be like, well, you gotta fill out a 42-stroke-B in triplicate and get it signed by the whatever, the governing body of whatever.
Right. Before that, the usual answer is you just gotta work harder.
Listen, work harder, not smarter, right. Said many people.
Yep. By the way, we have on our show today, Jessica. She's back.
Oh, hey guys. Happy to be here.
Yeah, so that's so true. Product owners have a much easier time when initiating splitting up teams, if they're too large, for instance, right? Than Scrum Masters would, because people just don't understand the importance when it's raised from a Scrum Master's point of view. It's often looked upon as you're doing it for your own convenience, whereas the reality is it's actually the opposite. A Scrum Master has more work to do the more teams they have. They have twice the number of meetings and events, right?
Sure,
they have more daily stand-ups and more sprint events and more coordination to do between the teams, assuming they're building up to the single product.
Right.
So people don't understand that. That's why they push back and say, just work harder. Right? Yeah. They resist that. But a product owner saying that is looked upon in the light of the business. This is a need from the business because the product owner is the voice of the business. So people are more likely to agree with that directive from a product owner.
Well, hang on. Let me pause you for a second because I agree. The businesses side of the business. That's not a way to say anything. The business side of the business. I did it again. The business side will agree with the product owner because the product owner is only concerning themselves with the effectiveness of the teams in the organization.
Bingo.
The development side, which the Scrum Master is part of, in my experience, almost all the time.
Unfortunately, they're a part of that, I would say. Unfortunately, they're a part of the development arm of the organization.
Yeah.
Sorry. That's a subject for another podcast. Yeah. Right? Where should they be?
Yeah.
We'll come back to that.
But because of where they are placed, they get wrapped up in these they get efficiency conversations, and they can't break out of these efficiency conversations. I feel like I can't say the word efficiency.
Efficiently. Can't say that efficiently. Yeah, you're right. Absolutely. Spot on. Yeah.
And that's how you get I'm a Scrum Master. I have 3 teams, in the example that I just gave. I have 3 teams, and just the math alone for 3 teams, carrying a 20% overhead per team, 60% of my time is just running from team to team.
Right. So unfortunately, for very new Scrum Masters, right, it tends to be a badge of honor. I've got 4 teams now.
You're right.
I agree. They feel like they're progressing upward the more teams they have. Well, the reality is they're actually going down.
That's exactly what happened with the individual I brought up too, was that she wanted to prove herself. And she's like, I can take on 3, that's fine. She wanted to say yes and come from a place of yes with leadership when they asked the question if she could take on 3. So she did. And when she got another opportunity without really trying, where they're like, no, we just really want you to work on one team and then also work with leadership, at a leadership level, and make changes from there. She was like, oh, you know what? That is a lot better.
Yeah.
So she jumped ship. And as she's, thinking back, she realizes that she didn't have enough time in her day at this other company where she had the 3 teams to actually enjoy her job as a Scrum Master. She was just jumping from one event to another.
Yeah, so no is always a shorter word than yes, right? So when you're asked to take on more teams, your starting position is no.
Yes.
That's what I say. I just say no. Why not? Because it's a shorter word than yes. No, let me tell you why. If I have a second team, you've got me 20% less Is that what you want? 1/5. That means 1 day out of a week. That's what it means, right? Is that okay for you to waste my time, in the best possible way? You could deliver this in a better way than I'm articulating now, but you could say, is it okay for me to just work 4-day weeks from going forward from now on? Because that's what you're looking at. 1 day less.
Yeah, but
you want me to take on a third team? Okay, 2 days less.
Yeah, but you're dealing with people that are efficiency of mindset. So if you were to, I understand you would give a different reason. You wouldn't give that reason, because given that reason, they would immediately fire back with the pedantic. Well, what do you do with all your time? Walk me through every single minute of every single hour of your day. You know what I mean? 20% overhead. I haven't exactly been in that conversation that I can think of in recent history, just because I would react poorly in recent history. But I know in the past I've been in that conversation where you'll sit down with somebody who at their little heart of hearts is a micromanager, and they'll be like, well, 20% overhead, let's go through that 20%. Walk me through exactly how many hours you spend on stop.
Right. So that mindset is that utilization mindset.
Right.
You'll often see that in PMOs where people will just chart everybody and go, oh yeah, you must be 85% utilized.
Yeah.
Whatever that means. Right. And people who say that target individual team members as resources. Makes my skin crawl. Resources. We're all resources. Resources are things like bricks and mortar. They're things that you use up. They're meant to be depleted. People are meant to be depleted. So treat people like people, not resources, for Pete's sake.
They are.
Right, I know in some places, they are. They are.
Yes, they are.
They're just basically, they're like lollipops, They're only good till they last, and then they go on the scrap heap, which is such a shame, because they are real live human beings with families to support. Until you understand that, you're going to treat people like a cell. Well, we're all cells on a spreadsheet somewhere, but you don't have to be treated that way. So this is part of that bigger discussion we're going to have one day about understanding this from an HR perspective. We're going to have that in a separate podcast.
Yeah.
And when we get an HR person in here.
I think it's hard when you're new in a corporation to say no when someone is asking something of you. You're trying to prove yourself in that space. Maybe you don't have a whole lot of experience under your belt either. So you want to say yes. I wasn't one of those people. I could have, but realistically I said, no, here's what I want. I want a max of 2 teams, so I have the time to be a good Scrum Master.
Well, kudos to you for speaking up like that, because you're right. Younger Scrum Masters with less experience, they don't want to say no, because they do want to prove themselves. But they think if they believe this is how they prove themselves, by having almost like feathers in their cap, 1 team, I got 2 teams, I got 3 teams, that's a recipe for disaster. Right. The way they prove themselves is say, I'm going to limit my working process. I'm going to have 2 teams at the most, ideally 1, but if you really force the issue, maybe 2, and I'll make a good job of that going forward, right? That's how they prove themselves.
Yeah.
By saying no.
Yeah, like before you got here, off air, we were talking about off air. Like anyone.
A lot happens off air.
We were talking about refusing to be a victim in a circumstance, and that a lot of Scrum Masters fall into well, management told me to do this, and they're my management, and I didn't want to question them because I don't want to get fired, because I told Om earlier, I was listening to a podcast talking about this subject earlier in the week, and the person in the podcast, he was in the Agile field, and he was pretty senior in the field, but he was talking about this specific topic, and he's like, oh, well, when we interview people, he owned a company, right? So he's like, when we interview people, we'll ask them, tell me about, a particularly challenging team that you're on. And he's like, the reason we ask that question is because we're looking out to make sure that they're not, oh, management just did this and they wouldn't let me do anything. They were real micromanaging, and they basically they put themselves in the role of the victim, basically absolving themselves from having any kind of agency in that situation.
Yeah, it's not me, it's the situation.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And he's like, oh, we're looking out for that because we want people that can retain some sort of agency or authority or some sort of reclaim their influence in a situation where they're being victimized. They don't just turn themselves into the victim. I threw out a lot, so I want to leave it open-ended for you to just tell me what your general reaction about that is.
I don't know. It doesn't sit well.
Yeah. Okay. I'm glad you said that. I'm glad you said that. Like this could have been a real interesting podcast.
Oh, I
Could
agree
have been
with
a
that.
boomerang.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, if Jessica was like, that totally makes sense. You always have I remember the specific example they used was you're walking alone in a bad neighborhood at night and you get robbed. I don't know why I'm like talking with the creepy voice.
I think it adds to the suspense.
the evil of the thriller. You're walking alone in I'm doing it again. You see a tortoise in the desert. You're walking alone in a bad neighborhood at night and you get robbed. But you could totally say it's the person who's robbing you, the robber's fault, and you were basically powerless. But in reality, you shouldn't have been walking there in the first place. And I'm listening to him saying this, and I'm like, I understand the point he's trying to make.
That
But
you're never a victim?
You can't let other people completely make you into a victim because that mentality is pervasive, corrosive. It gets into other places. That was the point he was trying to make.
Yeah, not very well. That example.
In like my brain heard it from like coming from a very entitled place.
Yeah, he's not probably spent a day in the life of that person as a role, I mean, right? Because, yeah, I get it. You don't blame the circumstances all the time. But I have a right to walk wherever I want, whenever I want.
Right.
We live in a free country, last
Right.
I checked, right? So there is that side of it too. So I don't feel like he picked the best example here. His point is valid though, right? His point is valid. Don't blame your environment all the time and say it is what it is. I see so many people capitulate to the situation and go, that's just the way things work here. Say, no, no, right? You have a moral obligation. Even I'd say you have a professional responsibility to push back when things aren't being done the right way.
Yeah.
And people don't feel comfortable doing that because they feel like their jobs are threatened. They want to continue getting paid, doing the same thing,
Right.
so they don't want to push back. But you really need to push back because pushing back is the only way you're going to be able to show the fact that you're representing a way that you want them to go down, right? Because they don't know. These people grew up as typical kind of hierarchical project management people.
Yeah.
They don't know Agile. It's not their fault they don't know Agile. It's this time. It wasn't their time. So show them. That's your responsibility. Show them. Say no. And say, here's why. Don't just say no to be obstinate, right? Just say no, but, or as most people say, and I don't like this, yes, and. Yes, and. You're wrong. Yes, and.
Oh man.
This is how you should do things.
You don't like that?
I don't like that.
Why?
I think it's overplayed.
Oh,
I think
you've heard it
it's
too
way
much.
overplayed. Yeah.
I mean, it's better than the alternative, right?
I don't know. Sometimes a brick in the face is as subtle as I want to be. You know?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of saying no and then just turning around and walking away.
You want to give them the reason why and then give them the first chance at refusal. That's okay. But oftentimes diplomacy doesn't get you anywhere in these situations because you're talking about somebody who's had 5, 7, 8, 10 years of experience speaking with somebody who's had 25, 30 doing things the same old way.
Yeah.
So immediately you're on the losing end,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
how do you say yes and to that? They're going to say, come back to me in another 15 years when you've got enough experience. I certainly think that somebody who says no and walks out, I certainly think they're a stronger person than somebody who just says, well, that's just how things work here. We're going to just go with it.
Wishy-washy.
Because you're
Yeah.
propagating the madness. That's what you're doing. But I think the biggest thing is you've got to empathize with those people that you're speaking with and say they're in the situation they're in, not necessarily through any fault of their own, right? So identify that and then just say, listen, things used to work great that way, but they don't work that way today.
Yeah. That's the Scrum Master skill set. So like where I was going with that was this dude's bias. He needed someone to kind of like get in there, let him say his deal. The host did not do this, right? This is the problem with the corporate podcast where you can like dissenting opinions they're not, not desired here.
welcome.
Yeah, not welcome at all. But having somebody there who could challenge his view in this instance and then kind of pull him into a discussion of why do you think that way? Here's some conflicting worldviews. Why don't we talk about that? And kind of challenge him on that and draw him into a conversation about that.
But that's hard to do when the host works for that guy.
Yeah, but non-podcast specific,
Yeah.
non-corporate shill specific.
Yeah.
The skill set of being able to actively engage somebody like that to say, oh, well, that's interesting. You think that way. Like what experiences and theories and practices and whatnot bring you to think that way? And let's kind of walk through it and talk about it. I feel it's important to have those one-on-one conversations with people to figure out how they think, so they can start like maybe it's one of my biases. Maybe I'm just the person looking at this all messed up. I have this warped perspective from all these years of working for people that just run in my face and be like, when is it going to be done? How much is it going to cost? I don't care about anything else. I don't care about you. 60-hour weeks. We don't care forever. And you have this warped perspective of what you think work should look like because of the way you've been mistreated.
Right.
You don't need to pass that along. Maybe somebody can come along with these skills to try to get you to understand that you've been mistreated. I'm sorry about that.
Right.
What can we do about that now? And what can we do to help you not pass that behavior, that bad behavior? We called this a character defect earlier.
That's right. That's what it is. It's a character defect.
What can we do to help you not pass these character defects along to the next generation?
Is that possible at that point? I mean, he's so hardened and jaded. By his experience.
That's a great question, right? Is that possible? One of the responsibilities of a Scrum Master / Agile coach is to coach up, right? So the latest Scrum Guide even says that, right? It says you need to coach up, you need to coach the business, you need to coach your team. Those are the 3 areas. So what does it look like when you say coaching up? You have to engage in conversations with middle managers, leadership, etc., and sponsors. It's everything's up, right? So it is possible, but you're now empowered by the Scrum Guide says you should do it. You should absolutely do it. Now, the best way to do it, Brian just went there, is one-on-ones.
Yeah.
So you don't want to speak with anybody in leadership and kind of challenge them in front of somebody who's their peer. That will not end well for you, right? Because you're now challenging them openly. And you're not even challenging them on the one-on-ones, but you're just simply saying, this is how things have worked of late in our industry. What can we do to kind of try some of these things out in our environment? And so the next step from there is not, let's just change everything because I'm saying so, right? It's maybe we just try something for a sprint. That's again something we touched on as an experiment. Try it out as an experiment, but completely open to going back to the old way of working if it doesn't work. And then you work very hard to make sure that experiment's actually going to work, because then you can continue down that path instead of just going back and revert.
Sure.
So it is possible. All that just to say to your question, absolutely it's possible, but you've got to go in with that full intent. I'm going to make this work.
And that's assuming that they would take the one-on-one with you.
They will take the one-on-one with you.
Why do you
They
say
will
that?
take, because this is a process improvement. So when you request a meeting, please, everybody out there, don't say one-on-one in your subject, okay?
That's a very good tip, actually.
Do not say that. You are not coaching them. You're not their life coach or anything like that. You're not their career coach. They're not obligated to accept anything that says one-on-one. They'll shut you down when they see that.
Sure.
Just say something like process efficiency improvements. Okay, big words, doesn't mean anything. They're interested. They trigger on those words. Process. Efficiency. Well, that's what they're all about, measuring efficiency. You'd like them to not measure that, but that's okay. This is a lure to get them into the meeting. Improvements. Who doesn't want improvements? So when they're in the meeting, just say, here's something I'd like to discuss with you. And have an example. Don't go in and complain. Don't do that. Don't say, I've noticed this has not been working well. I wouldn't approach it that way. I would simply say, we've been following a certain way of working, and it's perhaps not the best way to work. And there are certainly ways to improve that. And I'd like to discuss those with you.
Yeah.
Right? Go in with options. That's the other thing I would say. Don't go in with one thing in mind and say, I'm going to present this and they're going to agree. They may not. So have 2 or 3 things in mind and go in and say, can we do A, B, or C? But A, B, and C aren't really too diverse. These are 3 experiments that you want to try anyway.
Yeah.
So if they pick B or C, don't feel disappointed. That's fine. That's still a win for you, right? Just do experiment C first and then go in and do B and A, or A and B. Yeah, they will definitely take that meeting.
Have you ever had anyone cancel on you?
Good question. Have I ever? Yes, I've had somebody cancel on me, but it wasn't a direct, no, I don't want to talk about this. It was more like, okay, well, I'll send somebody in my stead because they're busy. You know, they have golf games to go to. So so that's what they do. They just say, yeah, I'll send somebody else. Unfortunately, the person they sent isn't a decision maker.
Right.
At the very outset, they're an influencer, but I wouldn't even say they're a strong influencer. They'll just come because they were told to come.
Yeah.
Right.
And would your conversation with them be different than it would be with the
I didn't
original
have
person?
that conversation with them.
Oh, you just didn't attend?
No, I didn't. No, I just basically said, I need you. If you're not available now, can we do this at 8 a.m. as soon as you walk in? I've waited for people in the lobby as they come in.
Oh.
Just to have a conversation up in the elevator, 2-minute conversation, right? That's enough. You know,
I used
just
to
to
do
get
that.
that tee up a meeting. Yeah, that's a very common technique. I mean, it works. It works really well. You're actually really stalking them at that point. You know, just waiting in the, but you're not. I mean, it's not like you're going to their home.
Oh, you are.
But, you know, well, you're waiting at the office. You know, you kind of know when they come in, so you're going to wait. And sometimes they're late, and that's okay. You wait till they show up, and then you're like their best pet, right? The dog is always wagging the hardest when they see you every day. So yeah, when they come in, it's like, hey, good morning. I just have a quick question. Can I ride up in the elevator with you? What are they gonna say, right? And so you've got 30 seconds to 60 seconds. Make your case and say, I just need 5 minutes. 5 minutes of your time. Right?
So what do you do in the virtual space?
Same thing. You stalk them. You figure out. So seriously, you figure out what their schedule looks like. You can usually see the open calendar, right?
Sure.
I mean, when you try and book a meeting with them, you can see that. So find a spot on there, no matter how small it is. If you see they've got a small window, grab it. If you see they have no windows, try another day. Or reach out to them and say, I need only 5 minutes of your time. When's the best time?
Yeah.
I'm open all day, even if you're not. You'll shuffle your other meetings around. So yeah, you just got to be persistent. But they will listen.
Brian, your thoughts?
Honestly, I'm amazed the longer and longer we go on, how many effective business analyst tricks Agile coaches use that are just BA tricks. Like, but before Agile coaches existed, I remember working at a particular organization that was very old school, where you had, you know, directors and whatever, and a very siloed organization. And everyone was working in the office. Obviously, nobody was virtual. And I would wait downstairs in the lobby. They had a huge lobby with all the elevators, and I'd wait for the person, you know, some director or whatever that is a complete slave to their calendar. They have absolutely zero time. Every meeting is back to back. Obviously, they could have delegated any of those meetings. They really probably should have. But, you know, again, you don't get to that level in the organization without some kind of possessive trait in your personality, right? And I would ride up in the elevator, or if the elevator thing was kind of, because at that organization, a lot of people knew me. So like you could get trapped in conversations where you couldn't break away without being rude. So that wasn't cool, because their workforce is older. So you couldn't just be like, oh, hang on, and just walk off. I would go to people's offices, or I'd go to the floor where their office was, and I'd wait by the elevators at the floor where their office was for them to walk out. And be like, hey, on the way to your desk, on the way to get coffee. Also, everyone in that building went to the same like place across the road for coffee. So sometimes I would get there early, waiting. I'd go get a coffee, and I would wait down having a coffee, and I just wait until, you know, see who came in that day, because I had just a list of stuff that I was trying to get done with the requirements.
Coffee places, those are good ideas. Coffee machines, you know, on their floor, for instance.
Because you're a hostage. You're waiting in the line.
Exactly. Or the cafeteria. You know, they got to have lunch, right? At some point. So you look for, this is going to sound bad. What you look for is the same time slot every day on their calendar. Like, say it's between 12:30 and 1. There's a good chance they're going to have lunch during that time. So I would definitely be doing that, waiting for them in the cafeteria.
I'll tell you.
But about the distractions, to your point, right? In the lobby, that other people will say, hey, Brian, hey, Om, right? Easy. Put your AirPods in. They just go, hey, just wave at them. My AirPods aren't active, but I'm just like, they're just placeholders.
Sometimes that works.
Yeah, sometimes that works. And then when you see that person, right? And you go straight in at them. So I mean, there's a lot of little things that you can do.
What helped in that instance, when you're trying to stalk people, you know, no, totally don't endorse stalking in any way, shape, or form.
Do not try this at home.
But if we did endorse stalking, I would add this skill to your stalking ability, and you stalk people in a positive manner. Something. I'm trying to make a point here. It's not going over well at all. What I'm trying to say is like, even in the case where you're trying to coach somebody that is, seems uncoachable or seems very hesitant or resistant to your coaching or to your advances, the power of positive intent changed my outlook and made me more effective at dealing with people like that. They're totally busy all the time. They don't have time for you, and they don't see a reason for all this, this coaching type of stuff and this mentoring one-on-one, whatever. Like, it's all fluff. There's no reason for it. Like changing the way that I looked at and interacted with people like that helped me be more effective at interacting with people that are, because they're busy. They're very confused. They don't have the ability to take control over their own calendar. They're not good at delegating, or they don't want to delegate. So there are some issues.
Absolutely.
So they need someone to help them first understand you have some issues. You need to see somebody to help you with these issues.
I will share one last tip in terms of trying to approach people, because we don't endorse stalking at all, is when they leave the office to go home, there's that little walk up to their car. Perfect place to go. Join them.
Oh my gosh, that sounds so creepy.
Hey, you're leaving work at the same time. That's all it is.
But these
you
are,
walk to the same parking lot.
But you have to understand, if you're a business analyst and you have to get this section of the requirements written, if you don't get this person's time, the cost of delay is the next time you get their time is like 3 weeks from now that you can schedule a meeting on their calendar. And then you pray that they don't, bump your meeting for something else. And then it takes another 2 or 3 weeks to get another meeting. So the cost of delay is like 4, 5, 6 weeks just to get what you think is a simple question answered. Hey, how does this database interact with this application? Because you wrote it when you were on the team 9 years ago, and now you're a director. The situation I was dealing with was exactly that. Somebody had written some code a long time ago. Nobody knew how it worked. It was an old school organization, so it was a series of contractors.
Sure.
So the contractors were just in and out, in and out. There was no permanent expertise about the product, and I needed one person's time who had elevated in the organization way up here, and they had no time in their calendar.
Situations like that,
10-hour days every day.
Yep,
booked.
Absolutely. You got to use their language though. So that's the kind of person that you would say, hey, this BRD will never be complete without your help. Right. Normally I wouldn't use that acronym, but I would in that case, because you want to get their ear. That's the whole point. Yeah,
but where that comes in to join our domain here is a lot of the organizations at the team level, they're trying to, you're going to play the Scrum Master. At the team level, they're Scrum, they're Agile at the team level. They use Agile language. But at the higher level of the organization, waterfall. Once a month, once a year budgets, projects. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like you're not, so when you come out of your team up to a higher level, now you got to be able to operate with that kind of culture.
And I think that it begins with the acknowledgement that it's not, they're bad, they're doing it that way. Because remember, that's how they worked. That's how their career has been. Agile is relatively new. So fine, acknowledge that, empathize with them, and just let me help you. With this situation. That's where you should be coming from. The other thing I'd say is take a deep breath and coach up. Because if you don't do that, nothing will change. Which is what you see all too often out there. You still have annual budgets out there, right? You still have people doing PMO level
in the majority
work.
I would say,
As a consultant, I feel like maybe this can get challenging because it sounds like it takes a long time to build this relationship, build the trust, make an impact at that level. When you're getting that initial resistance, you finally get a hold of this person, you're seeing some changes happen. But as a consultant, you kind of hop from project to project. Do you get burnout doing this over and over again with different people?
If I can take a stab at this first, right? So I would take that and turn it on its head. Being a consultant is actually a huge advantage. I'll tell you why. You're not worried about what they're going to say. You're a consultant. They've called you in for a specific purpose, right? They've called you in for that reason. They've recognized your skills. Your organization sent you in there. So do your job, basically, right? But whereas if it was a full-time employee at that organization, I bet you they'd be very reticent about speaking up because they'd be afraid to, get their head chopped off, right?
Sure.
So I'd say use that to your advantage and say, listen, I bring a specific perspective here from the outside, which you may not hear from within your organization. This is where I need to speak with you. Let's sit down and say, this is how I want to lay it out. Let's engage together on this, and always land in that same spot, which is, I'm not suggesting you change everything you do. I'm just saying, let's try it for a bit.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. What's the worst that will happen to you as a consultant? They'll simply call your company and say, we don't like the way Om works.
Right.
Fine, your company's going to send somebody else in. Chances are they're like-minded. They're going to say the same thing.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't worry. I would take that as a positive and say, this is my competitive advantage as a consultant.
Mm-hmm.
It's a good perspective. Do you share the same one?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, like I've said before on the podcast, the only thing you can do is fire me from the client. But what are you going to do? You're going to fire me. You're going to get back in another consultant that probably has the same mindset I have. They might be a little better at their soft skills than I was. Probably, mostly, pretty much everyone. But the process they're going to walk through to try to solve things is probably going to be the same as me. So your problems don't go away when you cut a temporary employee out of your work center. But again, even I have come a long way, even from the last project that we were together on, with trying to focus on everyone's trying to do the best that they can. You know what I mean? No one's trying to do anything negative, or no one's air quotes out to get me, or whatever you want to say. Like to assume that everyone's doing the best they can.
That's
positive
the
intent,
old
you know?
prime directive, right?
Yeah. It is. But when you really take that in and move forward with that, all your interactions kind of get colored with that. And I would say people, they kind of sense that, as opposed to the people that work in these companies that are, wearing their political mask that they got to wear to act a certain way around a certain person, and everyone feels fake. And when you say, oh yeah, I'm just trying to help, hey buddy, tell me about your problems. Well, I'm not really going to tell you about my real problems, because then you might use them against me.
Right.
The older I get, the less I want to even deal with any of that.
But the older you get, and this is not about age, this is the more experience you gather, I guess. Whether you recognize this as a kind of conscientious thing or not, you're actually doing more self-reflection, I find. At least for me, that's true. In my younger days, I didn't do that, right? When I say younger, I mean like professionally speaking, right? So, initially when I started work as a Scrum Master, I was just like, okay, this is what I need to do. That's what I see other Scrum Masters do today. That's what I was doing. When I see them doing that, I don't necessarily say, oh, they're wrong, or, no, because that's what I did. I mean, they don't know any better. I have the benefit of having spent a few years doing it. They haven't. So how can I help them? The option of them just waiting X years as I've done, that's crazy. That's linear thinking. Yeah. You don't want that. You want that exponential ramp. So what I'm going to do is talk to these people and say, listen, and that's the mentoring that we talked about in the earlier one.
Right.
This is what I found has worked in my experience. So I understand where you're coming from, but right, this is what I found has worked.
Yeah.
So sooner or later, you're going to have to deal with the same things.
Yeah.
And then leave it up to them to say no. Again, they have the first right of refusal, right? You're not forcing anybody to do anything.
Yeah, here's my challenge though. You can't force someone to be mentored. Right. They have to come to it. And in the mentee, is that the other side of mentee?
Yeah.
What a terrible name. They need a new name.
It's as bad as coachee.
Yeah. Oof. Coachees. Oof.
Protege.
Gross. Ooh, protege is a good one. Yeah. In that relationship, it's up to the protege. Padawan. It's up to the protege to do basically all the work in that relationship. If they don't want to, you're pretty much dead in the water. Like, you can give them all the advice in the world, but they need to be willing to take it in. So in the position where you find yourself coaching, mentoring, this situation is giving somebody some advice. They have to be in a place to hear it first.
They do.
But so that's my challenge to that is, in a lot of the development teams that I've been on, and a lot of the development teams that I've been on have been under the hierarchy of development. They would need a life-changing event to be even opened up to the possibility that they have biases, that they have outdated ways of doing things, that they have outdated theories of the way things should work. So you really, like, the Scrum Master becomes way more important. Scrum Master, Agile Coach, whatever, becomes way more important in that situation, because you hopefully can put somebody in the organization that can make a real connection with that person and help them understand that, either through their thinking, connect with them through their thinking, or connect with them through how they feel about the situation, and start having them realize, I need to go outside for an answer, because the way that I've been doing stuff is not working anymore, or I need to grow. How can you light that spark? How do you make it happen?
So as you were saying that, what flashed across my mind was this image of Mr. Miyagi, teaching young, I forget his name, but
Daniel-san.
his protege, right, so to speak,
Right.
grasshopper, right, trying to catch a fly with a pair of chopsticks. I mean, the frustrations they have will be usually are misconstrued by the Scrum Master or the coach as objections, right? But they're not. You've got to empathize with that, right. I think. They're frustrations. So in the case of Mr. Miyagi, if he had just said, oh, you don't want to do this? Fine, go, right? The movie would end there. I mean,
a terrible movie.
Yeah, a terrible movie. So, but that didn't happen. He actually aligned his thinking to the young grasshopper and said, I understand your frustration. Keep trying. You'll get this, right? That encouragement was critical. And we don't seem to do that. Most Scrum Masters don't seem to do that, I would say. They would just say, they don't get it, right? So-and-so doesn't get it. Yeah, of course they don't get it. That's an observation. But what are you going to do about that?
Yeah.
And so I think we need to go back again to what I said, self-reflect and say, where was I when I was in that situation? That's what they're at. I've got to help them along. So what can I do to do that?
I'm having a tough time with this topic. I have no idea where I can or want to go. What has happened with
That's
these
like
lights?
most of our podcasts.
Yeah, you're right. So why change?
Right?
You're right. I feel that again, if you're dealing with a typical development manager, person who's coming through the hierarchy of development, they really only have lived efficiency in the time coming up. And they're under so much stress and deadlines, real or perceived, artificial or whatever, deadlines. And I'm struggling to figure out if that is part of the reason why we don't need a Scrum Master. We'll let somebody play the role part-time. Is that why this is so pervasive? You have people that lack soft skills. Is that part of the reason?
I think that's a big part of the reason, ably assisted by this whole PMO mentality. But yeah, absolutely. Let's go there. What about the skill set of a Scrum Master? I mean, the hard skills are easy, right? It's just basically just everything that's in the Scrum Guide and executing on that. But the soft skills, typically, is where you go, are either not acknowledged or, in many cases, dare I say, frowned upon. Mm-hmm. Because they say, well, why do you need this? Why do you need that? And the reality is,
why do you need to have a one-on-one with me? Like, we're not talking about any stories. We're not talking about any features. Like, this is a waste of my time. You don't need to talk to me about.
Right.
Well, I don't need to be coached.
Yeah, and they even protect their teams by saying, don't have one-on-ones with my developers. Right.
Yeah,
let them develop. Let them develop.
Yes.
They're doing fine.
Yeah, we don't need retrospectives.
Exactly.
My
developers
developers can come to me at any time and ask for an improvement. I'll just make it because I'm a hot shot.
Yeah. Usually ask them, when was the last time they did that?
Hey, I don't need your input, buddy. I'm a hot shot.
Don't ask questions, right? It upsets the apple cart.
That's right.
Yeah. So this whole topic of soft skills, first of all, it has to be understood that these are soft skills, and these guys don't really have time for that. They only recognize training on hard skills.
I don't know. This is all part of a larger discussion that I want to have about
Totally.
A critical lack of leadership. I was talking about before the podcast with somebody else today about interacting with kindness. Or that wasn't the word that was used, but it basically was like being kind to everyone you work with. My arguing point for this is when women climb into corporate structure and get to higher levels in the organization, do they keep those feminine soft skills, or do they adopt male postures?
Do
they talk with
topic.
they become louder and more assertive in their voice, and do they like every managing director I ever interacted with, where they're just real short and curt in their interactions. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. I think a lot of that is, I'll call, acquired skills.
It's acquired so they can climb the hierarchy.
Exactly. I agree with that, because I saw
but the best organizations are not. They don't demand that you do that.
No, on the contrary, they actually make sure it's not required. To actually progress within the organization.
Yes, right.
I'm trying to remember whether there was a TED talk or something I saw from now the ex CEO of Coca-Cola. Mm-hmm. She basically came up through the ranks, and it was predominantly a male environment. She was the only person who was on the board that was female for many years, and then they finally promoted her to be the president and CEO of Coca-Cola.
Yeah.
And her thesis was in this talk, if she hadn't become hard-edged, as she put it, that was the word she used, a hyphenated word, hard-edged, she didn't think she would have been successful.
Yeah. So
I think that plays directly into what we're saying. I probably should have a separate podcast. But yeah, she thought in order to succeed, she had to be hard-edged.
Yeah.
Because everybody around her only understood that language, which I think is awful, really is bad.
So she had to deviate from her authentic self in order to achieve what she wanted to
She
professionally.
had to put on a facade, absolutely. Yeah. So what would happen if the C-level staff was predominantly female? And some of these female board members wanted to progress over and above their peers. Would they now put on a different facade?
I don't think so. I think I would expect that the majority of the C-suite is women. They will not let people into the organization that act like what we're talking about.
Oh, sure.
They will vet those people out in the interview process, and those people will never.
I absolutely agree, right?
You know,
but what would they do to each other, though, trying to progress up?
Act like civilized people. Like
I would hope so in the professional space. I hope they would act the same. That being said, I would want diversity, in the executive or C-suite. I want diversity, right? Like I wouldn't want it all female or all male. And I certainly, more than anything, outside of all genders, I wouldn't want them all to be the same personality. I wouldn't want to deal with all type D personalities. And I think that is the challenge. Like, was it your friend? Yeah, your friend mentioned earlier, right? Like maybe all those people had a similar personalities. So they brought people up that they acknowledged, like, oh, you're like me. Let's bring you up. You're manager material.
Prevalent. You're right. That's so prevalent out there. It really is. People recruit people that think like themselves.
Exactly.
As well. Yeah. And we see that all the time with our clients too.
I'm more fearful of that.
Yeah.
And that group think maybe, and you can't work around it if you're completely outnumbered by those individuals. When I say diversity, I want like high S personalities, like on a disc profile. I want steady people. I want influential. Like I want all of them because I want that diversity, and I want to be in an environment that allows for that to transpire. What are your thoughts?
I don't know if we can use any of this on a future podcast.
Yeah, I'm
we'll have to redo all this.
Try to put all this up without getting canceled.
Why would we get canceled?
I don't know. People act weird when you talk about men and women in the workplace. The reason I brought this up because there was one of the Harvard Business Review. I don't know if I shared it. I think I pulled it up on the screen when you were in the room once about why there's so many. Maybe I didn't. This is worth pulling out. I should pull it up. It basically says, why is there so many incompetent men at the top of leadership hierarchies in corporate America?
I think it was for that reason.
I think you're right.
Similar personalities. They want to.
Yeah, right. Yeah, well, there's that reason, which is they're just looking for people that have that same psychopath, sociopath type of skill set. The other thing that you can't discount is they're just hiring people that look like them. That's a real thing.
Absolutely.
Which goes back to not being called on any of your biases that we were talking about earlier. You're not being called out on any of your biases because you're never going to let someone in the organization that's going to call you out on your bias. Who's going to challenge you?
Absolutely. That's so sad.
That about encapsulates my feelings on the matter.
It's a sign of a poor leader, right? I wouldn't want to work at that organization.
That's probably part of what we're seeing in the market right now. Everyone's fleeing those types of organizations.
They're fleeing, and that's sometimes people say, well, that's a bad thing. I actually think it's a good thing. I think that's the disruptive move. I mean, way back in my early career, I only worked for organizations that were like the ones we're describing. All the C-level staff were men, and IT people were all men as well. Yeah. And they resembled, unfortunately, IT was rolled up under finance back in the day. So, because we're a cost center, we don't make money, supposedly. But yeah, so the CFO hires the director of IT who basically thinks and speaks just like him. And the director of IT then in turn hires project managers that think like him. And that's what happened all the way down. And it was horrible. Right. Now it's a different generation. Today's environment is, if I don't have the work conditions that I agree with, then see you later. I'm jumping.
Yeah, but it wasn't like that a year ago.
No, I understand. That was because of that anomaly called the pandemic. But I mean, aside of that, right, because hopefully we're kind of going to be through that soon. Yeah, but this is a huge change that's come about.
So what's the point of even getting into corporate America if I can't just be a psychopath full time? I don't really understand it.
American Psycho. Oh man, I think we're gonna cut all of this.
We went, yeah.
I did not like that movie.
All of this.
Thanks.
I know, I didn't either.
Thanks for coming to this podcast, of none of which is material I can use.
I thought the soft skills topic was very good. We could go into that even more in depth.
I want to talk about that one for a long time because all these like human interaction skills that don't have to do with technology, like this ship has sailed. People know how to do this stuff. People know how to train this stuff. People know how to learn this stuff. But for some reason, these skills are not in tech. And the tech people, again, since they've never been exposed to it, because it's not part of any of their tech learning or whatever, they don't think it's important. And again, since they own the credit card, they're never going to pay for someone who challenges them on their own bias, challenges them on their own, poor skills at pick your thing. And they're never going to let somebody in that helps them become more successful human beings. Like those people own the budgets. Like you're not getting rid of them. It's like convincing your manager you don't need them anymore. Like, we don't really need you to. We can manage ourselves. We don't need you to manage us anymore. Take a hike.
Office space. Yeah, why don't you go ahead and take yourself, make yourself useless over there.
When these people move into management, their gift should be all these skills now are the important thing to do your job, influencing, changing the organization, kind of pulling out the most important things out of people. All these servant leader type of abilities, when they move into management, that's what they should be focusing on.
How do you do that, though, when they've grown up all their lives doing command and control?
You don't.
Right? It's that whole thing about why it takes a mind shift to be agile.
I would expect that the people in those type of organizations will tell you, you don't. You just get rid of those people and you get the right people.
Absolutely. There's collateral damage, unavoidable.
I'm sure management would tell you the same thing. This was we talked about this before about what it would take to change the culture of an organization. You have to decide what your mindset you want to have in the organization and then start looking for people who already have that mindset to bring in.
Or promote from within.
Right. We didn't even get into one of the other topics I want to talk about. I have this theory that corporate America values extroversion over introversion. And we've talked about that before in the podcast about the introverted way of collaborating is a lot different than the extroverted way of collaborating. We
could do a whole podcast on that.
Yeah, we really could. Yeah. I think from here, we have to take it away and think about how we want to approach the conversation.
Yeah, you're right. I think we could probably break up what's left or even what we've just recently talked about into maybe 2 or 3 podcasts.
I still want to talk to y'all about sprint reviews, but we'll get there one day.
You want to talk about it now?
Okay. It's very time intensive to create the sprint review presentation decks for each team. I think I talked about this on one of the podcasts before because as soon as I got in there, I'm like, I'm not doing this. I don't have time for it because it takes 3 hours to put it all together.
What?
It's a very manual process. So what I started doing was just taking snippets from Jira and putting it in the presentation deck. I'm still not satisfied with it, but it cut it down to like 30 minutes. Yeah. So it is what it is. But the problem I see is that the meeting itself takes a couple hours, for one. 2, all the teams kind of pick what they want to demo, not everything in its entirety, just like what they want to pick. But the worst part is there's no business representation in the meetings.
Then why does anybody show up?
Right. Why are you here? It's such a waste of time. Yeah, so like maybe an IT manager will show up. Essentially, the value that the team thinks that they're giving by attending these and providing a demo is simply to show the other developers in different teams what they did. Or just, yeah.
I say cancel it. Seriously. There's no value in this event whatsoever. Cancel it.
I would agree with that.
I'm a big fan of the total anarchy the methodology that we're advocating right now. I'm like, nobody seems to be having value. Event canceled.
No, seriously though, just reach out to the business people and say, we need you here. This is for you.
Yeah.
And start uninviting all these other hangers on. Seriously,
it's wild.
They're not needed.
There's 70 people on the call, none of them from business.
No. I would uninvite 70 people and invite 1 from the business. You've gained so much more by doing that already because you need the right people. This is to show the business working software. So we look at that sentence and say, who here is from the business? If you're not here from the business, I'm going to give you the next 2 hours back.
Yeah, the product person in me wants to challenge even further than that to say, I don't even necessarily care about the business. I want the customers.
Yeah.
I want the customer.
Yeah.
So I would go around, again, like organizations are different. So not every organization is going to be accepting it. Like this would be an extreme practice at some organizations.
You could espouse to that in a few sprints.
But I, the product person, probably have a few customers that I'm used to talking to on a regular basis, and I would start bringing them in. So because I have relationships with customers, assuming your product people actually have those relationships, and they're not some product manager who's over the product owners does not like hold those relationships at super tight. Like, don't talk to my customers because you might say the wrong thing. And
those are proxies then, and you really don't want to deal with them. Yeah, absolutely.
Assuming that situation is not happening now, we even go way down a rabbit hole talking about, well, if that is a situation, but I don't want to go down that rabbit hole now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely. If you've got nobody from product or to his point, right? Somebody who's the actual user who gets value out of it.
Yeah.
Then why bother?
I mean, our product owners show up, but they would know what's going on, right?
Yeah,
there's a PO acceptance in our status. They already saw the work. There's no need. Other than they get to see other teams, which I guess is beneficial if there's any cross-team dependencies.
Sure. But, get rid of that PowerPoint deck completely.
I would love that.
Get rid of it. So in Jira, you can certainly have 2 widgets on a dashboard that say, here's how we started the sprint, day 1, and here's how we ended the sprint, day 10, if you're on 2-week sprints, right?
Mm-hmm.
And just show them side by side, but don't dissect them. Just say, we took on 5 stories worth 30 story points. We ended up doing 4 stories worth 28. That's it, done. Now, if the 28 is a 10, that's such a low number, you could say it was because 2 people are off sick or whatever it is. Just a 1 line, 1 bullet. That's it. And you're not dissecting that. You're simply disseminating that info. You're just saying this is why. Okay, now we're getting into showing you finished software.
Yeah.
So the whole thing should take less than 30 seconds.
Yeah.
1 slide. That's it.
I really like that. Much better. Much better.
That's what I do today. I
Really?
don't use. I just copy paste from Azure DevOps, but any tool, just copy paste, beginning, end, and 1 or 2 bullets, and that's it.
Yeah.
We don't get into dissecting the sprint. Well, you did 32 story points, and last sprint, I remember it was 48. We don't go there. We just simply say, this is how the sprint went.
Mm-hmm.
And then over to the dev team or whoever's going to do the demo. Just get on with the demo. But just to finish that, if the right people aren't in the room, cancel the meeting.
I'm all about canceling that meeting.
Just work out the cost of that meeting and say, guys, we're saving the company this amount of money. And with 70 people there, it's huge.
We did a podcast about the Scrum events and how to kind of change them or do something a little bit different or a little bit radical than most people. And one of the things we talked about was the sprint review, breaking it up where every time a feature was done, you would get your people together or whatever, demo it for the product owner and whoever they invited quickly. And then each time a story was done, you kind of do your sprint review in little chunks, rather than a big bang at the end or a big, hour and a half long, whatever it is, however long it is. Rather than do that, do it in little chunks as things move to done. That way people are seeing every 3 days or whatever, people are seeing finished work. And then you don't have a thing at the end.
Correct.
So
I
that
agree.
maybe like you could use that in this instance to kind of pull the pull the wool over them and be like, hey guys, we're not doing the event this way anymore. We're kind of going to do it as we finish. But then not every story gets its review because some.
Yeah. But I'm all about that because why wait till the end of the sprint before you show value? It's like we've delivered value, but I'm not going to show it to you until the 10th day. There's no sense in that.
I mean, I can totally understand what you're saying, but if we're already challenged with getting the business to join this one meeting, will they join these maybe ad hoc meetings to see our work?
Probably not.
Probably
Yeah,
not.
you just got to pick your battles, I guess, right? Yeah, you're right. Absolutely. But start somewhere. Start by canceling. That should show them that we're not wasting time. 70 people's time for 2 hours, right? You go figure out the cost of that. It's pretty colossal, right?
Yeah.
So you're simply saying, I'm saving the company all this money because the right people are not in the room.
Right.
And then you reach out to the right people and say, because you're not in the room and all these people are, we're wasting money. Can you attend the meeting, please? It's for you, right? And uninvite the rest of them, all of them. Uninvite them. Just invite the right people. That's it.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll see. I have all offshore developers for one of my teams. And when we have the sprint review, it's in the afternoon, so it's out of their time zone. They can't attend.
Yikes.
Right. And so they can't obviously demo if that be the case, at least live. So I had asked the product owners on the team if they could demo. And they're like, we can't do that. It's too technical.
No, it's not. They should be doing the demo, to your point. It's not the dev team that should be doing it.
Right.
But they demo to the people that are attending your meetings. They need to, right? It's the users that they demo to and say, here's what we built for you. Mm-hmm. It's not the dev team doing it.
Yeah.
That's right. And that's exactly how I responded, right? Realistically, the product owner should be able to demo to the business. And it doesn't need to get technical, because oftentimes the business doesn't need to hear the technical side of things. They need to see the business value delivered. And their response was, the business has never come, so there's no point of doing that.
Well, that's not on you so much as it's on them, right? Because they have to prove to the business that there was value delivered in the sprint. So, if you're a space rocket company, imagine saying to them, just trust us, it's going to work, right? They want to see it. So when they see it, you're not explaining to them the thrust rate, the ignition timings, right? The fuel burn rate. You're not explaining all of that. You're simply saying, just watch the countdown. It's going to go up, and it's not going to blow up. It's going to go up all the way up there. Just watch. So they don't have to be technical, the POs. They just have to be able to show the work.
Right.
And there's a big difference there. Oftentimes they think, well, because it's software, it's technical. No, click a button. At the end of the day, what is everything? They're not going into the database doing SQL queries, right? Mm-hmm. At the end of the day, everything is either a click or a right click. They can manage that. Mm-hmm. They're POs. Right? Show them the app and go, when you click here, something happens. Let me help you. If you don't know how to click, I can help you. Right? Mm-hmm. But it's that simple. It doesn't matter what the app is. Everything's a click or a right click. So why can't you demo?
Yeah. With that thought in mind, do you think the development team needs to be in attendance at the sprint review?
Yes, I'll tell you why. Not to do the demo, but they've built the product. So if there are questions, which is the whole point of the review, is to get feedback, right? So if there are questions, they can internalize the questions. They can ask questions back to get clarification. That's why. The other thing is about giving them the expression. They should feel proud of their work to be able to say, hey, look, we did this sprint. For that reason, because 9 times out of 10, if the stuff works, they're going to get positive feedback. They're going to say, good job or whatever. Yeah. That's worth gold. So they do need to hear that from the customers or the product owners or whoever's going to say it, right? So for that reason, I would say, yes, they should attend.
Yeah, okay. I mean, they're responsible for the work, so it makes sense for them to be there. But on the other hand, if they're basically expected to present the work and there's no users on the call and there's no fit like that, to me, I just answered this question earlier when somebody asked me, what's the real purpose of the sprint demo? They call it a demo. And I was like, well, the sprint review, I sure did that too. The sprint review is important because it's 2 parts. Number one, it lets the Scrum team show what they did, lets them walk through. But the more important side of that is getting the feedback, like looking at the users and seeing what their initial take from the work is to try to see if they got the, whoa, that's good. To see if they got that shocked face, that elated face, or if they have a bunch of nitpicky questions about, well, how come it doesn't do this? How come it doesn't we thought it was going to whatever. And whatever that feedback is, what I said was it's important for the development team members to see that feedback in real time, because then it lets them know that they're on the right track with their customers. And if they're not seeing that feedback, how are they, what, are you just going to believe the product person? You put all your faith that the product person is kind of leading you down the right without any kind of evidence or stats or asking for any proof at all. You're just going to trust that all of your teams, because you think your team is relying on this person to make their work valuable, because the product person could easily lead you down a path where none of your work is valuable. Sure. All your money is thrown away that went into that sprint, and the business is not going to be happy. But who's the business is going to take that on the team? They're going to cut the whole team. Sure. Too many sprints of that and
gone. Yeah. So other than the trust issue that you highlight, I think it's more more important to say, as you were saying, right? Are we delivering the right product?
Right.
So that's the review where you ask that question is, are we delivering the right product, right? As opposed to, are we delivering the product right, which is more on the mechanics of the
Sure.
sprint itself
Sure.
and the operation, how you execute,
Sure.
right? So the team members have to hear that. They have to hear the pluses and the minuses. If they hear from the customer, the body language and everything is important there too. If the customer is sitting back like this, they're not engaged, they're not enthused about the product. If they're rolling their eyes, something's wrong. If they're saying, well, so I have to click there and do this?
Right.
Okay, well, that's feedback. Maybe there's one step too many in there.
Right.
So you ask the questions, right? How would you make this better? What would make this better for you?
Right.
And they may say, well, if I can jump straight from here to here, that's feedback. Now, how do you do that if you don't have the developers there to understand it and ask questions, and also of the right people, which
Yeah.
is the customers here or the POs?
Oh.
The last thing I want to say about this is this. Even if you had the trust in your PO to say all the right things and do everything right, they get feedback because the dev team is not there, and then they relay that feedback to the dev team. Now you've got 2 hops of this information where things can get misconstrued unwillingly, but
Right.
that's why you need to reduce the channels of communication and have point to point instead of point to point to point.
Mm-hmm.
That was a
It was
perfect,
very well
yeah,
done. I
perfect-
think we need to end,
perfect
honestly.
beginning, middle, end.
I liked it. I think that was our best one yet.
All right, it's a wrap. Let
Oh,
us know what
man.
you want to
Great
talk about,
night.
what you want us to talk about, and smash that like button.
No, smash that like button.
That was good.
I know. When I use this voice, it sounds professional. Oh, it's terrible.
So, and I wanted to, do you want to start?
No, I was going to say you need to be closer to the microphone.
All right.
You were leisurely laying back.
Oh, I just wanted to talk to you guys normally. Let me get
Leo,
in here.
This is not talking
This
normal.